Do you have a bucket list travel wish? Well, if you do, you want to listen to this episode. We have a travel expert, and she is going to lay out in detail the importance of having a travel consultant on these major trips.
We hope you've been enjoying all the episodes from Secure Your Retirement. If you'd like to keep learning and receiving these episodes, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you receive alerts when they come out. We've helped thousands of listeners get on the path to securing their retirement. Now it's your turn. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Secure Your Retirement Podcast. Today, I am extremely excited because it's a topic that you should be excited about, and that's travel. And I've got a whole story to tell about this, but we have brought on a very special guest. Her name is Molly Glasgow. So, Molly, first of all, let me just say thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today and taking some time out of your day to share some good experience with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So, kind of give you a little bit of background as to why I'm excited about this is that one of the things that Merce and I get to do is we get to work with people as they are transitioning from really a work life to a retirement life. And sometimes even as people are wrapping up work or they're transitioning over into the retirement, the number one thing we ask is we say, so do you have some extra travel that's in your plan? And what we find most of the time is that people say, yeah, when I'm going to retire, I've got about 10 years that I want to do some extra types of travel, some bucket list things that I just didn't have time to do while I was working. And we had a client of ours, and I had learned about Molly and her travel expertise. And so we connected that family up with Molly, and the experience was really, really good. They were like, oh my goodness, I can't travel without Molly ever again, not going on these bigger trips. And so it made me go, wow, this is something I want to make sure people understand about what's out there and set that up. And just so you know, they were actually looking at like AARP and the group travel, and they go, we don't really want to do a group. We really kind of want to go and do these things, but we don't know how to plan it. And so we put them in contact with Molly. So Molly, first of all, can we just to get to know you a little bit, kind of tell us about how you got into travel, what motivated you to do that, and a little bit about you so people can connect with you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for your kind words and for connecting me with your clients. They were such a pleasure to work with, and I was honored to be a part of their trip. So how did I get into travel? When I was 14, I took a family trip to Europe, and it just sparked my love for travel. And after that, I kind of vowed to myself that I was going to travel any chance I could get. And I studied for a semester in Florence, Italy. And then before I went to MBA school, I worked and lived in Switzerland, and just loved travel, meeting new people, understanding cultures. It just kind of lit something inside of me. And so, beyond that, I had a career in pharma and then commercial real estate. But I was always traveling and putting together, I was like the crazy spreadsheet girl that would put together these spreadsheets of their trips. And so friends would say, hey, send me your spreadsheet for this, send me your spreadsheet for this. So, people started to lean on me for travel advice, but it was merely a hobby. And then in 2022, I took a pause from my career in commercial real estate at the time, and was actually on a sabbatical and was sitting in Anacapri in Italy, looking out over the beautiful water. And at that point, I decided I absolutely cannot go back to what I was doing before, but I wanted to find something that inspired me. And everyone had always said, why don't you do something in travel? So I started doing research, and I'm like, whoa, this has become much more of a consultative industry and business. My prior experience was in consulting, and I loved working with people. And so I launched my business in travel. And I went through an intensive training program with the company that I'm affiliated with called Brownell Travel. A really fascinating company because they are the oldest host agency in North America. So when you go to the headquarters, you see pictures of literally years ago, people getting on ships to go to Europe with their big trunks, because there's a lot of history with the company, but they have great leadership. So I went through a training program and tap into their incredible network of partners around the world so that I can serve my clients.
Well, Molly, that's fantastic, and thanks for the little background there. I think when we're talking about our clients, and some of them travel for work, and traveled throughout the years, but as they kind of entered into retirement, the
the repetition of travel. You know, if you travel a lot, you get pretty good at it. You learn how to navigate airports, you know how to look up destinations and things like that. You build those spreadsheets, but once you kind of transition into retirement, maybe you lose some of that, or you just get a little bit nervous around it, especially in the post-pandemic world that we live in now, where, you know, destinations that were pretty cool maybe aren't as cool anymore, or they're still recovering. So what are some of the challenges, you know, people face when they're planning these big trips, and how do you help with those pain points?
Yeah, so great question. And I think for one, there's just information overload right now. When people say, hey, I want to plan a trip, and they go online and start looking at it themselves, they're just completely overwhelmed. And they're like, where do I start? So that's a big part of it, is I help clients kind of distill down their interests and destinations and really dig into what they're looking for. People will come to me with a plan and say, hey, I want to go to maybe 3 countries and I've got 10 days. And we talk about, you know, connectivity between countries and what it looks like to get to and from different places. And so really kind of digging into the reality of what the travel looks like, so clients can have a true vacation and an enjoyable trip versus being on the go all the time, is a big part of what I do. People also kind of don't know the overall cost and budget of what a trip looks like, especially if you're looking at luxury travel with private transfers. And so I help clients establish a realistic budget, understanding what the realistic spend could look like by destination. And that really varies. I mean, people will say, well, what can I, what can I expect to spend on a European trip for 10 days? Well, going to Italy looks very different than going to Portugal or Spain or Slovenia. So I really help people build realistic budget expectations before going into trip planning. And then as far as accommodations go, I help select those. People have different preferences on what they want. Some people want a bigger property. They want specific amenities. Some want a boutique hotel that really feels like it pulls from the local culture and area. And so I can help clients kind of put together really good options based on that. And then you mentioned kind of COVID and the pandemic and impacts on travel. And the reality is the pandemic just reminded us that the world is unpredictable, and so is travel. And so when I have clients traveling internationally, it's nice to know that you have people in country that can support you. So I work with companies in country called destination management companies, or on-site. So they're local partners in country, and they have guest ambassadors that are in the same time zone. If my clients have issues arise while they're traveling, say they miss a train, say they can't find their driver, they have a contact to call in that same time zone that can troubleshoot it while they're there.
Excellent. When I hear that, so I know that whenever my wife Lauren and I travel, we have, I think, very similar travel habits. I know some of our friends, they're like, they want to go do every single thing, pack days, all that kind of stuff. We're much more along the lines of, like, we want to go see something, and then we kind of maybe do that for a couple of days and want a rest day. And then we do something else and we want another rest day if we're going to be on a longer trip. You know, we're cool with the fact of just hanging out a little bit. But what I love about in this kind of conversation is, what is very helpful is to know, what should we make sure that we go see in a place, and what should we make sure we don't miss out on, and what are those key elements. But I guess this kind of, I know that's the way we travel, but other people travel some other way. How do you kind of work with somebody to kind of align them up with maybe the way they like to travel, their unique experience? How do you work with people to help them think that through and make sure they get the trip they really want?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, and you talked a little bit about, I call it pace of travel. And that's a topic that I talk about in great detail with my clients, because that varies by client. But I take a very consultative approach with my clients. So the first thing I do when someone has interest in working with me is get on what I call a discover call. And it's a 45-minute complimentary call where I really dig into their personal preferences, their interests, their activities, their hobbies, how they like to travel, what they want out of this particular experience, which can vary by trip and destination. And so I have a whole slew of questions that I ask folks, from pace of trip to interest to, what do you want out of a hotel experience? What are your priorities? And so from that, I really dig into kind of their needs and desires, and that is kind of my roadmap for planning their entire trip. And then once we have that call and they decide they want to move forward, I start integrating my local partners into the process, design an itinerary really based on what we talked about on that call, and then work collaboratively with the client to go through different iterations and revisions of the itinerary until it kind of meets their satisfaction. And at that point, I proceed with booking everything for them.
Hey, just real quick before we move on to, I'm just, and this has just popped in my mind. I know we're talking a lot about these big European type trips and those kind of things, but do you work with folks if it's going to be maybe they're trying to do some kind of experience within the US and they're doing those kind of trips as well? I just want to make sure that we got context here. Is it just those big European trips or something like that?
Work all over the world. I've planned trips recently. Someone wanted to do the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, so we made that a really special trip. We had somebody that wanted to go to Miami with a group of friends. We made that a really special trip. We had a group that went out to Palm Springs for a long weekend. So yeah, we can absolutely do stuff in the US, and we have partnerships with these hotels around the world, including US based properties where you can get extra perks and amenities through my partnerships with them.
Okay, good.
Well, that's good. And it's good to hear that you've got a process of, hey, let's sit down and actually get to know each other, try to figure out what it is that you're looking for, rather than saying, hey, where do you want to go? And you get a response back, and then you just kind of, you're throwing, what's the phrase, mud at the wall. Hey, here's what I think you should go do, without knowing anything about the client. So I think it's good that you have a process to understand them first and then make recommendations based off of that. With that said, can you give us any examples of some of your favorite ones that you've put together, kind of for our listeners to entice them as to what goes into the whole planning process for you and what is the result of it?
Yeah. Gosh, so many. For me, it's really about working with the people and understanding the people. And I think that's kind of similar values in our businesses, right? Is it's really about the people that you're working with. And different situations motivate travel or cause people to travel, and people reach out to me, and it may be that they're celebrating a big milestone, an anniversary, a birthday. I've had people reach out to me because they're in remission from cancer and they want to plan a really special trip. I have people that are maybe overcoming grief and want to plan something special for their family, to focus on something new and positive. And, this is kind of a really personal story, but not to me, but to the people I was working with. I had a client reach out to me whose wife had passed away from cancer, and he had two elementary age kids. And he said, hey, I want to plan a trip to thank my parents for all the help that they'd given our family when my wife was sick. And I want to give my kids something positive to focus on this year, because it's been a really tough couple years. And so we put together a really incredible itinerary for this multi-generational family, and brought in a private guide that dug into their family heritage and took them through Scotland. And they went to family heritage sites and learned about their family history and did really cool stuff together with the kids. And, that stuff is special, and being able to contribute to memories like that for families is really why I do what I do. When I look back at my life, a lot of my first memories are traveling. And so being able to be a part of that really brings me a lot of joy.
That's a really cool story. So when we talk about travel, sometimes people just go out, maybe they're trying to wing it. Maybe they do a bunch of Google searches, all that kind of thing. But what are some things that you think people might maybe overlook when it comes to some experiences, or some things maybe that because they just are not experienced at maybe going to this particular location or certain type of trip, that they would just overlook?
Yeah. So a lot of times, I think there's been a shift in travel, and in the past, people would travel to kind of check off seeing landmarks, and that was how travel was kind of conducted. But as time has changed, I think people are looking more for experiential travel, and they want to really immerse themselves in the culture and understanding the world and the people that live in these different destinations. So a lot of people that come to me, they're like, hey, I want to interact with people that live there. I want to immerse myself in the culture. And I think that's where I really can add a ton of value for people, through my destination partners that are in country, because we can pull together really unique experiences that you can't find on Google. And it may be that you're cooking in someone's home. It's like cooking with your grandmother, right? Your Italian grandmother, or you might tour these artisan markets in Peru. I mean, there's, you name it, or you want access to kind of behind the scenes experiences like the behind the scenes Churchill War Rooms tour, or I want to go see the behind the scenes, see the crown jewels in London, whatever it is, you know, people can come up with these outlandish ideas and we can kind of bring them to life. And so that's where we can really add a lot of value, is when people want this experiential travel that they want to feel like, hey, what does it feel like to live in this city? Or I'm going to tour these neighborhoods, or, you know, I mean, it's just unique experiences. And then we really customize it based on personal interests.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And you know, you're planning trips for people all in all types of parts of the world, all over the place. So there's a lot to keep up with there. And I mean, I've had scenarios where I thought I did the best job and I did the research on Google and TripAdvisor and found this perfect hotel. And then we get to that hotel and, you know, half of it's down for renovations or construction, or it didn't look like the pictures and all this stuff. And so how do you stay up to date with, you know, locations, destinations, accommodations, and, you know, making sure that, you know, what you tell the client is going to get is what they actually get?
Yep, great question. So there's a number of ways I do that. Through my partnership with Brownell, I have access to all these fully vetted partners around the world. And when I say fully vetted, it's from a quality perspective, it's from a financial perspective, because there are companies that went under during the pandemic. So we know that they're sound financially, but also high quality guides. A lot of the guides are historians, really well-educated, knowledgeable people that are going to bring you a wealth of knowledge when you're traveling. And so through that partnership, we're on webinars with them constantly, one-on-one phone calls, different trainings. So that's always happening. And that's a part of my weekly work life. And then I also have access. We have a Slack channel. So Brownell has 150 advisors, and it's an extremely collaborative community. And so we have something called the Travel Tribe, and it is just constantly going with questions and sharing of knowledge. So anytime something comes up of a destination, maybe that's I'm not as familiar with, or I haven't been to recently, I can get the latest and greatest because these people are also traveling and sharing information. So there's that piece. And then I'm also going on educational trips myself. So in November, I spent a week in Provence touring luxury villas. Some people want to stay in villas when they're traveling. I leave next week and I'll be in Mexico, and I'm staying at a wellness resort called Sha Wellness outside of Cancun. But then I'm also touring all the 5-star properties in Riviera Maya while I'm there. And it sounds glamorous, but it is actually, it's very rigorous. I mean, I'm looking at, call it 5 or 6 different hotel properties a day. And so it's really meant to inform me of what's going on and the differences of the accommodation so that I can match the clients with the right properties. So just a few examples, but a lot of reading, a lot of communication, and a lot of calls with partners.
Yeah. So obviously, to me, you listen to this and you're like, okay, having a consultant like you is obviously very advantageous. And there's lots of things that you're already telling us that would say these are all beneficial. So what I'd like to jump to is really kind of thinking about this idea. I've got a person has a life trip, this trip they've been thinking about, and they're going to retire, and they got this, they're going to say, hey, this is a once in a lifetime type trip I want to put together. What are some things they need to think about now if they're thinking about this trip, you know, wherever it might be in their life, whether it be in a year, 2 years, 3 years? What are some things they might need to think about for a trip that way?
Yeah. So my biggest advice for people planning milestone trips, and in your case with your clients, kind of looking at the overall big picture, is one, start a list of the destinations that you're really interested in so that you can be intentional about hitting these destinations. And then we can talk kind of on a more macro level about timing, best time of year to visit these destinations, and also start planning early, 12 months out. Reach out 12 months out, especially for like a safari. You have to plan 12 months out at least. People think that's too far out. And I'll be honest and say, hey, we don't have pricing yet for this, but as soon as it comes up, then we can work on locking it in, but we can do some of the pre-planning before. Destinations like Japan, that's another one where there's a bit of a shortage of really quality guides there. So you want to start planning that destination really early to ensure that you can have access to the unique experiences that you want. So I would say be intentional and start early. And I'll shoot people straight if they reach out and I say it's too early.
Yeah. Yeah. So Molly, it's clear that you're passionate about this, and it's also now evident that there's a lot of work that goes on in the background as far as the research you do, and going to sites and everything to make sure that you can kind of put forward the best product for the client at the end of the day. So you told us a little bit about your process somewhere in the middle of our recording here together, but could you kind of, as we close this out, just walk through how does someone get in touch with you, and then what is it they can expect as far as your process before kind of put a whole plan together for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a website, mollyglasgowtravel.com. Super easy to find. Glasgow spelled like the city in Scotland, so that's easy. You can go on my website and you can get my contact information and reach out via email. Before planning a trip, I always schedule a discover call, and I ask that my clients fill out my trip inquiry form first, which just captures kind of general information before we speak. And that helps me kind of understand what you're looking for, also determine whether I'm the right fit for the trip, because I'm always going to shoot a client straight and tell them where I can add value. And maybe if I'm not, either direct them somewhere else or to someone else, or, give them some ideas. And then once we have that discover call, then I send over pretty easy onboarding forms for clients to fill out. And then at that point, I have all the information I need to get started on planning. And then we work together. I get a first draft of an itinerary. We work together to revise it, go through the whole booking process. And then once clients travel, and while they're traveling, I'm also working with my partners in the background. People don't realize that, but while they're traveling, there's a lot of coordination happening between me and my on-the-ground partners. And then my clients are able to travel using an application on their phone. So I build everything into a digital itinerary. So literally they have step-by-step, day by day, here's what I'm doing. And it takes a lot of the thinking out of travel, because I think I've found when I am traveling and I've booked it myself in the past, I'm the one kind of coordinating, what are we doing here? Here's where we're going next. And so clients don't have that when they're traveling with me, because they literally wake up, look at their app. It can be PDF'd if people don't want it in an app on their phone. And they know where to go. They know who to call if they have issues. It's very simple. And makes the overall process kind of more enjoyable.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you very much. And by the way, for anybody who is wanting to see that website, we will have the website link in our show notes, and we'll have it on the website as well. So that way you'll have an easy way to get in touch with Molly. But Molly, this has been great. I want to go on a trip now. It just, and always, I love travel and it's exciting. I enjoy it too. And we get to go to a lot of cool places, but I think this is just a fantastic service. So if you are thinking about a trip, make sure you reach out to Molly. And thank you again, Molly, for coming on and chatting with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure to be on today, and I appreciate it.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Secure Your Retirement. If you would like to learn more, we have actually created an online course called 3 Keys to Secure Your Retirement. This video course helps you to think through all the different steps as you get ready to plan for and live throughout retirement. You can access this by going to our website, pomwealth.net. In addition, you can also subscribe below to our podcast called Secure Your Retirement.
For more retirement tips, check out these videos. Also, if you find them valuable, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a like.